Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Deep-3 here on Thursday, December 19th. Now, before we get to today's plays of the day, a quick announcement. I thought Scott Steen might be back today, but he still has the flu. He will be back tomorrow, though. We've exchanged some emails, and he told me that he was still sick, but he will definitely be back for Friday's show, so stay tuned for that. Other than that, though, since he is not available once again, I will be taking over for the show. And yesterday we did pretty well. Ended up going 2-1. We ended up winning with Gonzaga minus 12.5. Depending on what number you got, we got an early, and they ended up winning by 13. We also had SF Austin minus 13.5. They ended up winning by about 30, and we ended up losing on Utah State minus 8.5 as they ended up winning in overtime against South Florida by, it was either 1 point or 2 points. Either way, they weren't really close to covering throughout. But 2-1, still a profitable day, and we will look to continue that our profitable ways here on Thursday, December 19th. So without further ado, we're going to dive right into today's card. And it's very interesting because it is one of the first Thursdays with no Thursday Night Football because of the fact that now the NFL has decided to move some of their games to Saturday. So there is no Thursday Night Football. Cards a bit more limited. But other than that, though, we're still going to dive in. And the first game we're going to be talking about is going to be an NBA matchup between the Brooklyn Nets and the San Antonio Spurs. The line in this game is very interesting as the Spurs are 10-16, but they are still favored by 3.5 points. And we are actually going to be taking the Spurs here at minus 3.5, and that line is available at FanDuel at minus 110. Now, the Nets have been pretty solid so far this season as they are currently in possession of a winning record, as the Nets are 15-12 and the Spurs are 10-16. However, the reason for the spread being so high in favor of the Spurs is because of the fact that the Nets historically have been terrible in San Antonio. I know that a lot of that's due to the fact that the Spurs have been a solid team over the past decade, but the Nets are 1-6 against the spread in the last 7 meetings in San Antonio, and the Nets are also 9-25-1 against the spread in the last 35 meetings. The Nets just don't play well in San Antonio, and I know that the Nets were able to beat the Pelicans in their last game in overtime. They really didn't look good in the process. They pretty much sleepwalked through 3 quarters, then woke up in the 4th, and then had to win in overtime. They've looked pretty good. San Antonio, even though they haven't played well overall this season, they've been pretty competitive over the last week or so, as 4 of their last 5 games have gone to overtime. They ended up losing to the Rockets on the road by 2 in their last game, and again, they were up by at least 20-something points. They beat Phoenix in overtime. They lost to Cleveland in overtime. They beat the Kings in overtime, and they beat the Rockets in double overtime. The Spurs have been very competitive lately, and I think that the Nets, even though they've been playing good basketball, I just think that offensively they rely too much on Dinwiddie down the stretch, which is why the Nets have one of the worst fourth-quarter offensive efficiencies in the entire league. I think the Spurs, with DeJounte Murray, will come up with a game plan to stop him. I know that the Spurs have not played good basketball, but it doesn't change the fact that Popovich is still one of the best coaches of all time. I think he'll come up with a good game plan. I think the Spurs should be able to feed Aldridge and DeRozan against the Nets. I think the Spurs should end up playing well, and I think the Spurs will do enough to cover this number. The Nets, they just seem flat to me in their last game against New Orleans, and New Orleans has been one of the worst teams in all of basketball. The line tells me all I need to know here. I know that a little bit of money has come in on the Nets, but at the same point, I'm still going to lean to the Spurs here, as I just think this line is so out of whack that I think it's just a trap line for people to bet on the Nets. So for that reason, the first play will be on the San Antonio Spurs minus 3.5, and that is available at minus 110 on FanDuel. Now the other 2 plays of the day will be on college basketball. We're going to be starting off with a primetime matchup between NC State and Auburn. And in this game, we actually like a total here, and we like the over 152.5, which is available on FanDuel at minus 110. Now, at first glance, we're going to look at these 2 offenses and see that NC State's averaging 82.5 points per game while shooting 48.1% from the floor, and Auburn is averaging 83 points per game while shooting 46.8% from the floor. So both teams have very solid offenses. The defense have also been really good in this game, but it is worth mentioning that according to Ken Palm, both teams rank in the top 20 in offensive efficiency. So I think you should see both teams probably score a lot of points. Auburn and NC State also don't mind pushing the pace, running a lot of up-tempo because of the fact that both teams are pretty guard-oriented and they like to get in transition and find some open jump shots from downtown. I think you should see a decent amount of points in this game. Both teams should definitely score at least 76. I think both teams could be pushing 80 in this game, and I think that there is definitely a reason why this total opened up at roughly 151.5, has already been bet up a full point, even a 153 in some spots. I think this line will continue going up. I think this game will turn into a bit of an offensive shootout, and I think 152.5 is just too low of a total. If you've looked at the recent results for these teams, NC State has scored at least 80 points in each of their last 2 games. 80 points against a Greensboro team at home, which is actually very impressive because Greensboro, people don't know this, but they have one of the best defenses in the entire country. They ended up winning that game on a half-court shot at the buzzer, but either or, they still had 77 points before that happened. So NC State's offense is in solid form. Meanwhile, Auburn's offense has struggled a bit lately, but I just think that NC State and Auburn will go through a very fast pace, and I think this game should get into the at least 155, potentially 160. So for that reason, I also like the over in the 152.5, which is available on FanDuel at -110, and that is a matchup between Auburn and NC State. Now the third play is going to be on Northeastern -6, as they end up traveling to take on Detroit Mercy. And the main reason why I like this game, simply put, sometimes you just got to fade the bad teams. And Detroit is one of the worst teams in all of Division I basketball so far this season. And if you've looked at their depth chart, in addition to the 1-9 record, they have Anthony Davis, who's very solid. That's Anthony, not Anthony. But either or, he's averaging 24.1 points per game. He is only shooting 35.9% from the floor and 25.3% from 3. But the second highest scorer, so 24.1 points per game for the top scorer. Second highest scorer, 8.4 points per game. So Detroit only has one guy who's averaging double digits, and I think that Northeastern's good enough and competent defensively enough to just limit Davis, force the ball out of his hands, and to force somebody else to make a shot. But Detroit's been one of the least efficient offenses in the entire country. They're shooting 35.8% as a team, and they are shooting 32.2% from the three-point line. I just don't think Detroit's going to make enough shots to cover this number. Detroit Mercy's 1-9. It's also worth mentioning that Davis actually did not play in the team's last game against Toledo because of the flu. He's currently expected to play, but he's still not officially going to play. So there is an outsider shot that he won't even be able to go because of the fact that he is still dealing with an illness. But he's expected to play, but it is worth mentioning. But if you've looked at the matchup itself, Northeastern hasn't been great this season either. They're 5-6, but if you've looked at who they've played, definitely some tough matchups lately. They lost their last game on the road to Eastern Michigan by 5 points, which might not sound that tough, but Eastern Michigan's 9-1 with an undefeated home record. That is not that bad. They also lost to Davidson by 7 in the game before that. Davidson, they've underachieved so far this season, but they still have a lot of talent on their overall roster, and I just think that Northeastern simply has the better overall roster than Detroit does. You have Rowland from Northeastern, who has averaging roughly the same amount of points as Davis, but he's actually been significantly more efficient. Rowland's averaging 23.8 points per game while shooting 52.7% from the floor and 92.7% from the foul line. And if you've compared the numbers, Northeastern, so I said Detroit was shooting 35.8% from the floor. Northeastern shooting 48.6% from the floor. They're also averaging 3 more assists. They're giving up roughly 16 less points per game, and they're averaging roughly 6 more points per game than Detroit. I just think this is a mismatch. I know the game is in Detroit, so that could potentially play a factor. But Detroit's 0-2 at home this season, so far home court has not really done anything for the Titans, and I don't expect it to do anything tonight. This game might be close for about a half, but I think Northeastern will do enough to win this game by at least 8. So the third play will be on Northeastern -6, and that is also available on FanDuel at -110. So the 3 plays on today's card: Spurs -3.5 in the NBA, Auburn over 152.5, which is also available at -110, and Northeastern -6, which is also available at -110. All lines provided by FanDuel. Other than that, though, that's going to be this installment of the Deep 3 here on Thursday, December 19th. Good luck to all of you and your respective bets today. Bye, everyone.